The Chicago Bulls had Coby White and Josh Giddey, but were unable to snap their losing streak as they get beat by the Utah Jazz in double overtime, 150 to 147. We're going to be talking about the key takeaways from tonight's loss. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Buzelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about the key takeaways from tonight's loss against the Utah Jazz. And so I always like to start with the theme of the night. These are just points that really describe what we saw in tonight's game. And so I have three. And so the first one being, it was a slow start for the Chicago Bulls. They were only 4 of 13 at one point to start the game. And also, too, the Bulls really didn't do a good job as far as going and just making sure that the Utah Jazz could not get to offensive rebounds. And so the Jazz got a lot of second chance opportunities. And then the Bulls really couldn't hit anything from the three-point line. They started off 0 of 3, and so it was a slow start there. Nobody was getting to the offensive glass and really crashing that way. And it took to 50 seconds in the first quarter for the Bulls to get their first lead. They eventually ended the first quarter tied 33 to 33. And thanks to a 16-point effort off the bench for the Chicago Bulls to really get things going. And so a slow start for the Bulls. Next, got in the groove. I think that is the second point to this game. The Bulls really got into a groove in the second quarter. They had a nice little 10-2 run in that quarter. They went from tied to being up by 9. And you could just tell that the ball was rotating better on offense. They were getting to the glass a lot more better as well. And so just a much better effort in the second quarter, and the Bulls were playing their style of basketball. And that really carried on into the second half in this game, where the Bulls got up to a lead of 15 points, but the Utah Jazz just continued to chip away and just kept it close heading into the fourth quarter, where they were ultimately able to kick it into a couple overtimes, and then they win the game. And then the next thing for the Bulls, and just I think the next thing out of this game, is just really the same test, another game, because this is another game in which the Bulls get to the fourth quarter, or they're in these stretch runs and they just cannot close out the game. And then also, too, they get beat by star power yet again, because this is a game in which we see Lauri Markkanen come out with 47 points in this game. And so Lauri Markkanen had a really good game here for the Utah Jazz. 47 points, +4 in the plus-minus box score for him, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. He only had 1 turnover, and he was 6 of 17 from downtown and 15 of 33 from the field. And so yet again, we see another superstar performance from the opposite team. That really helped the Utah Jazz get this win, along with some other key, performances that the Utah Jazz had, but they were certainly led there by Lauri Markkanen today. And then also, too, the Bulls they continue to get beat on these backdoor plays. They continue to get beat in just switching and things like that, the miscommunication there, the rip screens and things like that. And so just really the Bulls had a chance to close out. They were unable to close out in clutch time. And so same test, another game, they got into their groove, and then also, too, it was a slow start for the Bulls. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into the MVPs on the night. And so there were 3 players that stood out. I believe that each one of these players actually led the Bulls in the plus-minus box score. And so MVP number 1 for me is going to be Coby White. So with Coby White was terrific today. So 27 points, 8 assists. And so if you didn't get a chance to see the game, he did not start for the Chicago Bulls, and he was supposed to be on a minutes restriction, but he actually went over the minutes restriction and he played 30 minutes. I believe they were saying they only wanted him to play 25 minutes. And so that's point number 1 with his performance today. Next, he was a +6 in the plus minus box score. He did have 3 turnovers and 3 personal fouls, but he was a playmaker today with these 8 assists. I thought that he did a terrific job as far as just really showing that he's fine from the calf injury, because he was out there. He was pretty shifty and everything else. And in fact, his first bucket was off a pin down screen where he is able to shake loose from his defender, get just the space that he needed, and knock down his 3. In fact, the first 2 threes that he hit, it was just a 2-for-2 start for him. And so he really came out hot in this game. And so he ended up finishing 3 of 8 from downtown, but he was 14 of 14 from the free throw line. And he also hit a critical basket to take this game into double overtime. There were a couple terrific plays that he also made down the stretch as well, where he almost forced a steal that actually would have won it in one of the overtimes, and then also to getting a critical jump ball. And so the activity from Coby White today, it was pretty good for the Chicago Bulls, and just a great performance here coming off of that calf injury. And so next, I think MVP number 2 for me was Josh Giddey. And so Josh Giddey gets another triple-double on the season. And I think that it was a slow start for Josh Giddey, because initially, he just couldn't get things going. And then he really started to get things going once he got the ball to go into the basket. After that, I think that that's really where he started to get into his groove with the 26 points. He was -3 in the plus minus box score. He did have the 6 turnovers there, and so he struggled with that. He did have 2 blocks, 2 steals, 13 assists there, 6 of 7 from the free throw line, and 2 of 7 from deep, and 9 of 21 from the field. And so I like the fact that he was aggressive coming back. And in fact, his first bucket actually came off of a rebound, which really got him going. And also, too, I think that Josh Giddey's presence really helped Nikola Vucevic, which we're going to talk about that in a moment, because Vooch played a lot better, with Josh Giddey out there. And that's something that was talked about really throughout the broadcast. And so you could just tell that when Josh Giddey is out there at the point guard position, this team understands where they need to be at, and understand, just really what he wants to do there offensively when he has the ball in his hand. So Josh Giddey, triple-double. You cannot fault the effort there. And so a good performance there. The next, it was Modest Buzelis. He was MVP number 3 for me. And I think that Modest Buzelis really got off to a terrific start, because he hit the Bulls' first 8 points in this game. I just loved how he was getting to the basket, and really you could just tell that he was locked in as far as just getting to the paint, being aggressive. I like the fact that he got to the free throw line, and then also, too, another thing that I liked with Modest Buzelis is, like, later on in this game, he had a really good sequence where he gets a block shot where he knocks it off the glass. He had a critical 3-point shot in the fourth quarter. And so Modest Buzelis, look, he definitely is showing that he is certainly taking a leap in year number 2. I'm not saying that he's going to be, just a franchise type of superstar, but man, you can just tell the growth is there. And so it's trending upward. 18 points, +3 in the plus minus box score. I'd say the only thing that I did not like tonight was the fouls. And so the 6 personal fouls, but we'll get into that here in a moment. He did have 6 rebounds. He had an assist. He had a steal, 2 of 3 from the free throw line, 2 of 5 from deep. And once again, the field goal percentage, or just the efficiency here, 7 of 13. And so I like that here in 33 minutes for Modest Buzelis. And so those were the 3 standouts here. Next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into the rest of the box score and just taking a look at some of these other players here for the Bulls. And so starting with Issac Okoro. And so with Issac Okoro, it was really a tough game for him today, because, man, one of his shots was an air ball where he shot that from the corner. It was a 3-point shot. He missed on a layup that was right there at the rim. And then he did come back, and hit a corner 3-point shot in the second. But he really struggled tonight. And I also think that really, with Issac Okoro, you could just tell defensively it was a challenge for him, because Utah went big with their lineup, and it was a challenge for him to kind of match up out there. He did play 40 minutes in this one. He was 2 of 7 from the field, 1 of 3 from deep. He did have 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, 1 turnover, and 4 personal fouls, and -15 in the plus minus box score for the Chicago Bulls today. Next, Nikola Vucevic. And so Vooch, scores 21 points. He has 3 personal fouls, a -3 in the plus-minus box score, 13 rebounds, and he also was 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 3 of 8 from downtown, and 8 of 17 from the field in 41 minutes. And so he did have the double-double. I didn't necessarily like the way he got to the double-double. And so if you looked at this game, this is something that was pointed out also too, just really throughout the broadcast, is that Vooch just didn't get down to the box enough. Like, I don't think that he really, took his opportunity to get down there on the post and really put pressure on the Utah Jazz that way. In fact, when you go back and you look at just some of the sequences in this game, especially when it came late, in the game and the Bulls were just answering the Utah Jazz, you could just tell that the offense really, it was tough to get those buckets because they really weren't getting the post entries there and really kind of making the Utah Jazz honor that. And so I think that Nikola Vucevic has got to do a better job as far as getting down on the box there. I will give him some credit there because, what he's doing is that he is certainly playing off of everybody else. And so he is at a point now in his career where I think that he's just looking for Josh Giddey, Coby White, and these guys like that to really set him up for his offense. And I think that that is one of the reasons why you see that he scores the points that he did, because, when these guys were out of the lineup, he was just averaging the 9 points today. And so Nikola Vucevic, gets the double-double. Would like to see him get down into the post, and he definitely struggled on the defensive side of the ball, especially when Utah really went into these actions where they would have Lauri Markkanen come off of these screens, and he would drop down into coverage instead of come up just a little bit and make Markkanen kind of think a little bit more. Just really was just pretty much practice shots for Markkanen at that point in time. And so he really struggled there defensively, but so did the Chicago Bulls. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into Kevin Huerter here. And so with Kevin Huerter, 6 points, +7 in the plus-minus box score. He did have 2 assists. He had 1 block, 1 steal, and also he was 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 2 of 8 from the field in 33 minutes. Kevin Huerter did start today, and so that should be noted. And I think that with Kevin Huerter today, even though he struggled shooting the ball, you still see the activity with Kevin Huerter, and that's what you love about him. He finds ways to be impactful for this team. Would he want, to maybe go out there and play a lot better offensively? Sure. Have we seen him play a lot better offensively? Of course, but still, I like what we saw from Kevin Huerter in his 33 minutes today. It just wasn't his night from the field. So next, just jumping into the bench here and just looking at some of those performances here. And so Coby White, we just talked about him coming off the bench. He was huge for the Chicago Bulls. But another guy that really should be talked about some more off the bench tonight, and I think that he had a huge performance for the Bulls, was Julian Phillips. I think that Julian Phillips was absolutely locked in tonight. I loved what we saw from him just with his cutting and just being available for some dunks. Vooch got him for a dunk. He also had a nice little backdoor in the second half for another dunk. He was getting to his corner three-point shot as well. And so I liked what I saw from Julian Phillips. I wanted to see some more of him in this game. And so that's going to kind of lead me to some of my game notes towards the end. But Julian Phillips, 4 of 5 from the field, 2 of 3 from deep, 1 rebound, -1 in the plus-minus box score, and 10 points. I liked what I saw from Julian Phillips today. Next, Ayo Dosunmu. Look, Ayo Dosunmu, I think, was terrific. He got back to the situation where he's just driving downhill and being a one-man fast break. And so 18 points in this one, -2 in the plus-minus box score, did have the 3 personal fouls, 3 turnovers. I think that he really had, a tough time in the first half with those turnovers. But really, I think that some of those things should have been foul calls, really, because you could tell that the Utah Jazz, what they were doing is they were kind of bumping players, as they're kind of getting over the half-court line. And I think that a lot of that stuff should have been called a foul. But I think that a couple of those turnovers actually happened in the first quarter for Ayo Dosunmu. I like the 5 assists with him, and so the playmaking ability was there. He made the Utah Jazz pay for sending him to the free throw line, and so he was 4 of 4 there, 2 of 4 from deep, and 6 of 10 from the field. And the thing with Ayo Dosunmu in his performance today is he actually gets to 3,000 points as a Chicago Bull. And so that was on a and one play. And so 3,000 points now with the Chicago Bulls. And so congratulations to Ayo Dosunmu. And so he was huge off the bench. And so next, Patrick Williams and then Jalen Smith. And so with Patrick Williams, the 8 points, I like the fact that with him, he was really shot ready, I think, for the most part. And then he hit a nice little jumper on the baseline. After a nice little turnover that, player fell down. He was able to take the basketball there. He got the assist to Julian Phillips for the three-point shot as well. And so I like that part of Patrick Williams' game today. I didn't like what I saw at the end with the defensive lapse there in the second overtime, where he clearly should have stayed up on top of that screen and not went to go ahead and switch it at the end. But, other than that, I think that Patrick Williams continues to be, aggressive off the bench, even though he was -7 in the plus-minus box score. He did have that steal, which I just talked about, the assist to Julian Phillips. I just talked about that. He had a rebound, 2 of 3 from downtown and 3 of 5 from the field in 14 minutes. And so next with Jalen Smith. And so with Jalen Smith, for me today, it wasn't necessarily the biggest effort as far as like what you're seeing offensively from Jalen Smith, but I like the fact that he was active with the rebounds, with the 8 rebounds. He had the 3 assists, and he also had a very nice block shot too at the rim. That was a nice block. He did have the 1 turnover, and he was 2 of 7 from downtown and 3 of 8 from the field. So just 1 basket away and 2 rebounds away from really getting a double-double. And I just like his confidence. And so even though it wasn't the best night for him shooting the basketball, he did not shy away from it. He was one of the guys that actually got a good shot based off of what Josh Giddey did in the pick and roll, because he continued to hit players with this behind the back stuff out of the pick and roll. And so Jalen Smith got a couple of those straight on 3-pointers. And so he knocked down one of those, and so did Vooch as well. And so, if he continues to just stay aggressive, be engaged like that, I think that things are going to continue to turn his way. And so it just wasn't the best offensive night, but still some good stuff here from Jalen Smith. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into really the team box score and just take a look at some of the key takeaways from that. And so, really starting with what the Chicago Bulls were able to do on the bench here. And so they actually set a season high mark today. And so 71-50 in bench scoring, the Bulls lead in that category. And so, I think that was really part of, I think, just really the shift in this game for the Chicago Bulls, especially in the first quarter, was their ability to have the bench come in and do what they did. And so strength in numbers yet again for the Chicago Bulls. The next, kind of jumping into just really, some of the field goal percentages here. And so you see that the Bulls were 49 of 108 in the field goal attempts today. So 45% for them, 44% for the Utah Jazz. They were 49 of 111. Then when it came down to 3-point shooting, the Bulls got up 50 of those. And so 19 of 50, 38% there. And then you see that the Utah Jazz were 37%. And throughout the telecast, they were saying here that the Utah Jazz traditionally, they do not shoot the basketball very well from downtown. And so it's ironic that they actually hit the shot there to win that game at the end of overtime from downtown. And so free throws, this is where it got interesting. And so you see that the Bulls were 30 of 32. And then you see that the Utah Jazz got to the line 41 times. They hit 34 of those. You see the percentage at 94% for the Bulls and 83% for Utah. And so I think that really, it's great that the Bulls got to the free throw line. That's a plus. But I also think that also might have taken the Bulls a little bit out of their game, because whenever you're going to the free throw line, the game is slowing down. And I think that kind of takes away a little bit of the, getting out and running kind of element that you want in the game. And so I thought that maybe that was a factor really for the Utah Jazz to get back into the game, because they were able to slow down the game and get to the free throw line. And also, too, it slowed down the Bulls, and then they got to the free throw line. And so, they hit their free throws and everything else. They still had a chance. Both teams got to the free throw line a lot. I think that more calls probably could have been called, probably both ways, especially with what I was talking about earlier here in this video. It just seemed like that the Utah Jazz were kind of coming out and pressuring the Chicago Bulls players as they're trying to cross over the half court line. And you could just tell, there was some bumping there, and you could definitely call a foul on that, but some of that stuff didn't get called. And so, that's just what I'm thinking here with the free throws and everything else. And so next with the assists, the Bulls do a good job there, 38-29. They lead in that category. You see the steals go to the Utah Jazz 13-7, Then when it came down to block shots, the Bulls 10-6 there. They lead in that category. And this is a big one. And so the Bulls right here, total amount of turnovers, they lead in that department 17-9, and they gave up 20 points on that. And so that really was huge for the Utah Jazz, being able to kind of chip away and stay into this game, getting the turnovers, and then also too, really making the Chicago Bulls pay when they got into these half-court sets and really opening it up for their players and things like that. The fast break points, 16-16, points in the paint, 54-52. The Bulls did a great job, I think, as far as finding ways to get to the paint and scoring the basketball there. And then you see, this is where it gets disappointing. The Bulls, their biggest lead, 15. You see the Utah Jazz, their biggest lead is 8. And then some of the, just notes before we jump out of here with this is that there were several, lead changes in this game. In fact, at one point, not counting the overtimes and everything else, it was like 8 lead changes, 10 ties. And so teams were going back and forth really, once Utah kind of climbed back into this game. You had 6 players that were in double figures. Also, too, Trey Jones was out. And so we talked about this in yesterday's video, dealing with that ankle. And so he's day-to-day. Maybe we see him against the Denver Nuggets here coming up here tomorrow, because the Bulls are not going to have Coby White out there. That's something that I also talked about with him, is that he is not going to be out there in the back-to-backs. And so the Bulls could certainly use Trey Jones. They could have used him tonight as well, especially with his just high level of basketball IQ and his ability to really slow down the game and his ability to get steals. Again, he's one of the top in the NBA with these steals. And so did not have Trey Jones tonight. The next, I think some of the things that I think about too, just down the stretch for this team, was kind of some of the adjustments that, we could have saw in this game. And so, I think that the rotations certainly were a bit tight. I think down the stretch in this game, you could see that Billy Donovan kind of went with the players that he trusted in this. And also, too, looking at just not adjusting, I think, enough to like some of these actions that the Utah Jazz were doing. Like they were trying to get, Vooch into these switches and things like that. And so I think that that's something there where the Bulls really should have just kind of taken the time out, talked about this stuff, and just looked at what Utah was doing, because I think that that is something that certainly kept the Utah Jazz in this game, was just getting like Markkanen in these type of switches where Vooch was kind of dropping down, and others too as well, just giving him too much space on that, a little bit too much confusion off of those screens and things like that. There were like some plays where Markkanen would be just at a standstill, and then it's almost like he's just trying to get his defender to just fall asleep subtly. And then the next thing you know, he goes full speed into a screen, and then players aren't communicating. He's opening up his hands. The ball's dumped down to him. He's either making the basket or he's getting fouled. And so Utah did a lot of that action tonight. And so, anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here what your key takeaways are from this loss. Again, this is a tough one here because the Bulls had all the chances to win this game. I do like the fight that they did stay into this game. Even though they gave up the lead, they still competed, and you just wish that they didn't have the slow start here. But yet again, it's just the same test right now for the Chicago Bulls, and it's something that they will continue to get tested on. They're going to have to grow from these experiences and find ways to win. And I think that once they do that, they're going to take another step forward as a team. And obviously, as this group gets better, that's going to help them. This team is still building with the personnel and everything else. And so, it's just a team that continues to take steps forward. And so tough loss tonight. Let's see if the Bulls can get back onto the winning ways here against the Denver Nuggets. And so we'll be talking post game for that. In the meantime, you guys let me know what your key takeaways are. And as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.